Bipolar fiancé became a radical feminist, left me for a woman, and took our son. I'm done playing nice. There's no happy ending to this story, no exciting revenge, comebacks, or exaggerated events. It's just a common, normal story, and sadly, it really happened. I did change some details, though. I wish this hadn't happened to me or any man, but my story is just one of many that remains unheard. This part of my life happened a few years ago, and as the story goes on, I'll try to share some lessons I learned. Pardon my English, it's not my first language. So here goes. My ex and I were together for about 10 years. We had similar interests, and we kicked things off from there. About her, she was diagnosed as bipolar. She was someone who took her medication religiously because she acted out of character without it. A word of caution: when your partner tells you they have a mental condition, consider it a red flag. Many people with such conditions don't heal and often get worse over time. I have no hate for them, but if you love yourself, find someone who's stable. I can't stress this enough, do not be a savior for broken people, especially those with troubled childhoods. They will drag you down and leave you empty. I don't really get along with a lot of people. I'm quite introverted, choosy, and I prefer to keep a small circle of friends. I don't go to parties, crowds make me uncomfortable. I tend to speak my mind and confront things I find suspicious, which doesn't make me popular. I lose friends over it, but that's fine with me. I'd rather have a few true friends than a crowd of acquaintances. We got along pretty well most of the time, but a significant part of our relationship was spent dealing with her problems, both personal and family related. She had a lot of drama with her relatives, who were malicious, deceiving, and even thieving. We bonded through those tough experiences, and she moved around a lot to escape them. I supported her every step of the way, which makes the end of our story even more heartbreaking. During our 4th year, we decided to live together, and by the 7th year, we were engaged. Despite her family problems and her condition, we managed well enough that it felt like we could take on anything. Even my family liked her. Financially, we weren't rich, but we didn't have money problems. I learned that arguing about money with your partner goes nowhere and creates resentment. You can discuss it, but don't let it become a blame game. Women, especially, can be spiteful when it comes to arguments and won't easily admit it. We both had office jobs at the time, and she eventually transitioned to working from home due to COVID. I decided to quit my job to focus on my family's business, and at first, things were smooth, too smooth. I became complacent, undisciplined, and even whiny, acting out of character, and becoming more emotional. It was a low point for me. I was losing myself and letting my emotions dictate my actions. I got distracted by things that shouldn't matter, too much time on the phone, social media, and games. None of it improved my life. My partner did the same. She followed my lead. She grew closer to a set of friends, whom I'll refer to as a book club, a feminist book club. She's known them for several years, even when we were early in our relationship, and I didn't see any harm back then. But as time went on, feminism started rearing its head, and these single women began to influence her. Fast forward to our 8th year together, we decided to have a baby before getting married for various reasons. When my son was born, I knew I needed to become a better man now that I was a father. She wasn't just my partner, she was supposed to be my everything. My son always will be. I worked harder at our family business, took on side jobs, and, to be fair, she helped a lot with side income and often had ideas on how to make more money. She was the mastermind most of the time, and that sounded pretty good because, after all, when my son turned 2, intimacy became an issue. She often wasn't in the mood and gave all the typical excuses to avoid physical contact. I tried to be understanding, considering she might be dealing with postpartum depression, PPD. She's had clinical depression for a long time, so it wasn't far-fetched. I didn't want to pressure her because of her condition, but there's a balance to strike. So, I focused on my son. He became my tiny best friend, following me everywhere, and that was big for me because, generally, I prefer animals to people. Spending time with him every day made him my little shadow, and I couldn't imagine a day without him. Meanwhile, my fiancée continued meeting with her friends regularly. Sometimes she would take our son, and sometimes I would stay home with him. When she got back, we would discuss our day, but her tone often revolved around how hard it is to be a woman these days. At the time, her comments went over my head. I listened to her rants, trying to understand her perspective. I noticed she was becoming easily irritated and combative. Small things would bother her, and she'd make snide remarks. We tried to make it work and had several conversations about it, but it was affecting our daily lives. She continued meeting with her book club, and I focused solely on my responsibilities, especially my kid. Her habits changed. She was on her phone more often, even ignoring our son. I tried to talk to her about it, and she just said she was feeling down and needed time to herself. Weeks went by, and it felt like she wasn't with us anymore. I started taking every opportunity to spend time with our son, even during her work hours. Over time, her opinions of men became harsher, and she kept talking about how her female friends were victims of the so-called patriarchy. I didn't think much of it back then because I was focused on enjoying my time with my kid. In hindsight, I should have paid more attention to the signs. My son became my world while my partner and I seemed to drift further and further apart, with a wall growing between us. Even intimacy became a non-issue for me because I was busy with what I knew mattered, especially my son. She also let herself go, gained weight, stopped bathing regularly, and let the house become messy. I clean and handle most chores around the house because we don't have a house helper, and even if we did, that doesn't excuse laziness. She, on the other hand, has gotten worse, lying on the couch all day, glued to her phone. I never found out if she was cheating, and it doesn't matter anymore, but what really hurt me was seeing my son beg for her attention like he was an afterthought. She'd notice him for a second and then go right back to her phone. Our fights escalated, becoming more physical and abusive. She never liked it when I turned my back during an argument, and sometimes she'd even attack me when I did. At one point, things got so bad that our son had to step in, and he got hurt too. That was my wake-up call, and I'm ashamed I let it get to that point. We tried talking things through, and it would be okay for a few days, but she always reverted back to her bad habits. I didn't know what to do, but I knew my son needed me, so I kept spending time with him. With her, it felt like a losing battle. I was afraid because I was losing the person I had shared so many tough experiences with, but now it felt different. One Sunday, we went to the park, and when our son acted up like any kid would, she got angry and shouted at him in public. I tried to calm them both down, but it backfired, with her blaming me for not doing enough. We drove home in silence, our son asleep in the back. She told me she couldn't keep it up anymore and felt trapped. I tried to reason with her, explaining that I was doing everything I could to support her, but she brushed it off, saying I was just making it all about myself. The next few days, you spent living like roommates. I still tended to my kid as best I could because he needed me, but finally, I just gave up. I told my parents I didn't want to be in this relationship anymore and needed their advice. They told me they understood, and I made them aware of what was happening and that things weren't getting any better. After consulting my parents, I told her I didn't want this anymore. At that point, I was still afraid of losing everything we worked on, and I knew my kid wouldn't have a complete family. I cried to myself because it was a hard decision to make, but it needed to be done. I didn't want my kid growing up seeing his mom disrespect me. So many men today let this happen and lose themselves. I figured I can't let it happen to me, or else I would lose more. The next few days, she became sweet and mindful, less on the phone, and spent more time with our kid. I didn't budge because I knew it was an act. So many women can naturally put on a show, and that is scary. She realized it wasn't working and tried guilt-tripping me by posting on social media about how willing I was to throw it all away without a single thought. People gave her their sympathies while hating on me. The screwed up part is that they only knew her side of the story, her truth and version. It's a woman's advantage. People will think she's a victim simply because she's female. I still didn't budge. It didn't matter to me how many people were saying I was an awful person, a bad father, and a bad partner. They just knew her side. And who do you think was fully supporting her on her posts? Yet, her book club. That horrible time was when feminism was surging around the world, and it got here too. A lot of my acquaintances went to her side, even some of my friends. I tried to talk to my own circle, and they all pointed it down to me not being a religious person. I told them I didn't need them judging me, I needed them to listen. I told them to go screw themselves. I'm telling you right now, it's not your enemies that will bring you down. It's the lack of friends. 3 people, however, were there for me. 2 of them were longtime friends, and 1 is a childhood friend. They asked me how I was doing and checked up on me regularly. I communicated properly, heard both sides, and trusted that I wasn't the bad guy in the situation, all while other people were attacking me. My name was dragged down, and some friends stopped talking to me. It didn't matter how I explained myself, I was simply the guy who oppressed my ex. Knowing nothing would go her way, my ex moved out and took our kid. This broke me further, and I wasn't actually getting the emotional support from my family. They're not evil, we just aren't used to being emotionally open to one another. Even if my 3 friends supported me, I just didn't feel it was enough. I started to distance myself from people and spent a lot of time on my phone. I was reading screenshots sent to me by other people about how terrible I was. It nearly drove me to the edge. Chemicals are part of my work and are easily accessible. I checked out but just couldn't do it. The next morning, my father saw me still brooding and asked until when I would act like this. I didn't answer, but it made me think. My mother, on the other hand, told me to act like a man, so I started. I didn't read any books about self-improvement, I just developed habits. My father kept calling me fat, so I worked on that too. I went from 91 kilos down to 73 in just a few months. I focused on our family business, and my ex and I settled for me to be able to see my kid 3 times a week. They moved not far from here, so it was accessible, to say the least. I also noticed a lot of things at the family business, how my parents struggled and felt helpless at times because I got so tangled up in my personal issues. I started to notice a lot of issues that needed to be fixed, and I initiated a lot of things that needed to be done. I kept myself busy, managed to learn to control my emotions, and I felt like I was a different person overall. Some months passed, and my ex found a new partner. I'm not overly concerned because the partner is a woman, a butch to be specific. I failed to mention that before breaking up, my ex suddenly decided she was bisexual. I was still consistent in visiting my kid, but there were times my ex would try to find something to argue about. I didn't want to engage her, so I kept quiet and thought only about my son. At that point, I wasn't feeling any anger or resentment towards her. I accepted her situation and decided to do my best for my kid. On one of my visits, she initiated a fight that turned ugly because I wasn't engaging her. She began shouting, cursing at me, and saying I wouldn't see my son anymore. I still didn't engage and just walked away. Believe me, I didn't want to leave my son like that, but I had to cool things off. Months passed, and she wasn't giving me any updates about my son, no news, no anything. I did see my kid. I ran into him at a local mall with my ex's new partner. My ex wasn't there at the moment, but the butch was. My kid was wearing a mask and a cap, and I almost didn't recognize him because I had lost a lot of weight and looked different. I removed my mask, and when he saw me, he ran over. I hugged him tightly and told him words I continue to live by. I love you, son. Don't forget me, and no matter what happens, I will always become a better person. Last I heard, they moved hours away. Those were my final words to him. I realized how much I needed him, but I don't break down anymore. Maybe it's because I know people, especially my parents, need me, and I have to be strong for them. In the end, I didn't hate or resent anyone. I just let go and moved on with my life. I'm not thrilled with how things have changed. It seems like certain movements have lost their meaning. To me, men and women still need to work together without so many walls between them. I also realized that even if she didn't have any outside influences, we would have been doomed anyway because of her medical condition and the fact that she's into women. The relationship would have dragged on, and my kid would have had to deal with more trauma. Thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. Story 2. I don't know what to do. My 28 female fiancé, 28 male. Alex has a BFF, Danny, 28, since they were 4. She's not like the usual Reddit BFF. She's a lovely, sweet person who has never crossed boundaries with Alex or their 2 other friends, Marcus and Daniel. The 4 are very close. Danny is gay and always was. She is very much a woman but likes to dress in jeans and t-shirts and not in any feminine clothing. She is lean, tall, has short hair, and is just one of the boys in a lot of ways. This weekend was Alex's bachelor party. All 4 plus 2 other of Alex's friends went along. It was to a coastal town that's well known for hosting bachelor and bachelorette parties, but there's no strip club or anything. They stayed in a B&B and have scuba diving and kayaking planned. First night went okay, dinner, restaurant and nightclub and home. Last night was the issue. They did the nightclub and headed back to the house. Marcus and Daniel, who are both single, brought back 2 girls from the nightclub and got busy in their bedrooms. The rest were drinking in the living room, but things got a bit loud and the 2 friends started complaining that they didn't get to go to a strip club and never got to see tea and sass. They were blaming their wives and calling them names. Danny told them to shush as it was ruining the mood, and they both thought it would be funny if they saw Danny's body bare to make up for it. The thing is, Alex joined in and they stripped her. She was screaming loudly and Marcus and Daniel came running and rescued Danny and put her in the bedroom with the girls and had a fight with the 3 men. Daniel doesn't drink due to a chronic medical condition and the medication he is on. So they packed up and took Danny and the 2 girls and left the other 3. Danny was hysterical and Marcus wanted her to go to the police, but she wouldn't. She was afraid to go home, so they ended up dropping the girls off and taking Danny to her parents', which was an hour away. Marcus was at my door at 7 a.m. this morning and he told me what happened, that if he ever sees Alex again he's afraid of how things could go. He told me that if he can convince Danny to press charges he will. Then he left. Alex returned about 3 this afternoon. He was a ting normally until I told him Marcus has visited. He was very nervous and tried to play down what happened as a joke that got out of hand. I'm devastated. I heard him out, but he knew I wasn't accepting what he was saying. I told him Danny may be going to the police and he got very panicked and pale. He said she had him blocked and he wanted to go talk to her. I told him she wasn't at her place as she was too afraid he or his buddies would turn up there. I asked him to leave and he didn't want to go, but I insisted. He was crying, saying it was a prank that got out of hand. I heard him out only as a courtesy to our 2-year relationship, but I'm done. I don't know this man. I don't know if I should reach out to Danny or just do nothing. Marcus and I have been in constant contact and he agrees that I have no option but to end things. I don't know where to start with canceling everything as the wedding was in 5 weeks, but it seems trivial compared to what Danny is going through right now. Marcus is convinced that Danny is going to the police after talking to her parents, so I think Alex is in trouble. I can't support him on this. Maybe I'm wrong as he was drunk and probably had taken other things, but this was his friend from age 4 and he did this to her. I had not blocked Alex, but I have not replied or picked up any of his calls. Update. Sorry, I don't know how to do updates, so posting this separately. It's been a terrible day. I can't reach out to my friends yet as I'm ashamed. I did tell my parents and my brother and they have been wonderful. My brother brought his friend with him when he came to stay, and today both of them packed up every bit of my ex's stuff and took it to his parents' house. Ex was there and just asked if that meant I was finished with him, and my brother said yes, and did he really expect any other reaction? His father intervened and told Ex not to say anything more. He told my brother to tell me to contact him on canceling the wedding and not contacting his father ever. My parents are handling canceling the wedding, and my father got into my cousin who is a lawyer, and he is going to help and advise me as needed. I have to disentangle myself from X on Lisa's bank account savings and such, although my brother made me transfer all of my money from joint account savings and daily accounts to my own account. It's a mess. I tried to ring Danny, but she isn't up for speaking to anyone, so I just text her that I was there for her and that I had broken up with Alex. She hasn't replied and I don't expect she will. She's in a bad way apparently. Daniel spent 3 hours with me today. There's a lot going on, but I'm afraid to say too much for fear of damaging any court case. Just to say, there are 2 videos of the incident. One by Jeb, one of the 2 friends. A lot of it is chaotic, but the last part is clear and telling apparently. The owners of the rental house apparently have gotten involved and have footage, but I can't say more. When Marcus left me, he went to both those guys' wives and told them what happened. Jeb's wife has been very helpful apparently, and she has split from him. The other guy's wife too has left him. Things are going how most of you want them to go, that's all I will say. Well, I will add it was worse than what Marcus shared. Daniel told me that before Danny found her style, she had long hair and dressed feminine and was stunningly beautiful, and all 3 of them were in love with her as teens. Alex took her rejection very personally apparently, and Daniel says he was angry and bitter for a couple of years but hid it from her. The thought he had gotten over it, but Daniel feels this smacks of revenge against her. Scary if this is true. I have and continue to receive hundreds of texts from Alex. He told me his father told him to stop texting me, but he can't. I haven't replied or blocked based on advice. This is very hard and I don't know what way all this is going to end up. Sorry about any mistakes and typos, I'm not doing well. If there's more I will post again if I'm able. Update. I got a call from Danny. Daniel has been ever present and I'm guessing it was because he knew she was going to call. There's a lot more to the story. The first night was normal as I said, but in the Saturday Alex, Jeb and their friend decided not to go scuba diving with Danny, Daniel and Marcus. Danny was feeling very hungover and gave up after an hour and went back to the Airbnb. She walked into the living room to find all 3 guys engaging in sensual acts with 2 women. Jeb shouted at her to get out as this was costing them a fortune. The women were escorts. She left and went back to the boat and only told Marcus what she saw. When they all went back later, Alex told her to not tell me as it was just his last bit of freedom. She told him she was disgusted with him and that he wasn't free. She told him she would have to think about what to do. Marcus convinced her to stay another night as he and Daniel had met the 2 girls the night before and were seeing them again that night. And if Danny wanted to leave, then Daniel would have to take her as he was her ride and there wasn't public transport in the tiny town. So Alex cheated, as did the other 2. Marcus told their wives that morning, but not me. He was going to do it in stages as he knew I was in shock. The actual assault went further than Marcus told me also. And while Alex hadn't actually done anything beyond pulling off her clothes, unlike the other 2, he stood by and watched and did nothing to help her. She said she thought he had taken shrooms earlier but couldn't be sure. Marcus and Daniel did rescue her, but things had already escalated. She went to the police immediately she got to her parents. The Airbnb owners had also gone independently when they saw the footage. All 3 men are facing the consequences of their actions. Danny told me she was sorry she didn't leave tell me immediately like she wanted to do. She is very distraught still. I didn't want to make things worse for her. I don't think I am needed for any legal proceedings, so I finally blocked Alex and his parents. The wedding is cancelled, and I'm just starting to disentangle myself from Alex on bank accounts and such. Here's my issue. I'm feeling very angry towards Marcus. It feels like he didn't really care about me. He stopped Danny from telling me so he could continue to shack up with the girl he met. He apparently feels guilty because if they had left, Danny would not have been attacked. He didn't do me the courtesy of telling me that Alex cheated that morning like he did with the other 2 wives. It's not like he was sparing my feelings because my ex assaulting another woman was a pretty damn bad thing to hear. He didn't tell me the full extent of the attack. Danny is still unsure if Alex wasn't just waiting his turn or all he was going to do was watch. I should have been told that ASAP and not from Danny because the conversation was incredibly difficult for her. Daniel didn't know about the escorts at all and didn't know Marcus hasn't shared the full story of what they saw when they burst in. Daniel has been my rock. I need some perspective here. Is it okay to be angry at Marcus? Is it misplaced anger? I'm pretty angry at Alex though, and that's all I feel towards him. Can anyone give me a different perspective I'm missing? Marcus and I had been in constant contact. He's already back at work, so it was messages, texts, and occasional calls. He actually visited last night, but I didn't open the door to him. Daniel is saying whatever I feel right now is okay, but I think he's just placating me. I don't know who to trust anymore. I don't have to have any more contact with Alex and think the case will move along without me. I'm thinking of telling Daniel that I need a break from him and Marcus and that group of friends. Danny and I have said we will stay in touch, but I can't see us being very close. My best friend, who I finally confided in, thinks I should just step away from them all now for good and try to move forward. My parents agree and think it's necessary for healing. My brother thinks Daniel has been nothing but great and I shouldn't cut him off. But they all seem to be a package deal, but without Alex now obviously. So I think it's probably all or nothing. What should I do? I don't want to be ungrateful, but a clean break feels right. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you really like our videos, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.